What's up, everyone? Shalom and Ahava. Welcome to Who's Your Rabbi. My name is XaIMe, and we're going to do a continuation of the Hanukkah Christmas relationship for a brief explanation of what Hanukkah is. You can listen to the previous message. I'll just make a quick reference that in the book of John, chapter 10, verse 22, it makes a reference to Jesus being in Jerusalem, it being winter, and it's during the time of the Feast of Dedication or the Festival of Lights. It depends on what translation. Some Messianic translations, like the Tree of Life version, actually use the word Hanukkah, which is probably the best way to translate it. But the Feast of Dedication, Rededication, or the Festival of Lights are all references to this particular feast. And the history of the feast itself starts off in the mid to late 2nd century before the Common Era, or BCE. So this is about 167 years or so when the actual story takes place, right before the birth of Jesus. And so what happens is that they've been under the rule of the Greeks for a short period under Alexander the Great. But shortly after he passes away, the kingdom gets divided into 3 sections, and 2 of them in particular affect the outcome of this whole situation. So it's the Syrian section, or the Seleucid Empire, which comes into play. But it's also the Ptolemaic Empire, which is based out of modern day Egypt. And so after Alexander the Great passes away, his generals take charge of these sections. And so the Egyptians are the first ones to kind of rule over the Jewish people and the land. They maintain some level of autonomy, but basically they're subservient to the rulers of these kingdoms. And then the Seleucid Empire comes in later on, and they basically overthrow the Ptolemaic Empire. And so this is the build up to what happens during the Maccabean revolt. And so, like I said before, the story of Hanukkah can be found in the collection of apocryphal or deuterocanonical books of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. The whole collection of the Maccabean works is divided into 4 books, but the 1st and 2nd are considered to be older. They're probably not the same writer. But they do give us insight into what is gonna be the build-up for the whole story of the Gospels, the Jesus story, basically. And so, it's just interesting to see that by the 1st century, when Jesus is around, he's not only keeping Hanukkah, celebrating, he's in Jerusalem during the feast. He's teaching in the temple, and he's been kind of going back and forth with 2 groups in particular, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And in one of those events, he's actually going having an argument or discussion, a debate with the Sadducees, and the Sadducees are actually the byproduct of this revolt. So the Maccabean dynasty, which would be known as the Hashmonean or the Hasmonean dynasty, gets established after they gain their autonomy from the Syrian Greek excuse me invasion. And so what ends up happening is that they establish a dynasty of kings and priests. And so the issue with this is that it's not according to what the Bible, or I should say the Torah in particular, mandates when it comes to who the proper lines of these two different ruling classes should be. Because if we go back to Exodus and Leviticus, we see that the priestly class comes from the Levitical or the Levites, the tribe of Levi. And so in particular, the high priest comes from the house of Aaron. And so that's part of the issue that the more religious the Jews have at this time, because while yes, this group actually kind of got rid of the nuisance of the Greeks, at the same time they imposed their own ruling class, and they did not follow the biblical standards. And what we know about the kingly line is that it's supposed to come from the line of Judah, and so in particular the Davidic dynasty. So there's a whole lot of political, religious. You can't really break the two. This whole thing about separation of church and state doesn't really exist in the biblical pattern, both in Judaism and in Christianity. They're kind of intertwined. It's totally secular idea, and so similar to what Islam has with the way they view Islam and the politics that tie into it. So it's kind of a similar. They actually get that from Judeo-Christian tradition. So it's not a new concept. They, how radical or how extreme they are as far as applying it, that's a whole different story. But anyways, so that's kind of a build up to what happens. But then we have Jesus in the first century, like I said, in Jerusalem, keeping the feast, and he's teaching in the temple. And this opens up the question as to what's the relationship between Christmas and Hanukkah, right? And if you study it out, you'll see that it's actually they're pretty close in a lot of things. The aspect of lights coming to the picture, the tree or the menorah. The Hanukkah menorah is called the Hanukkah. That's the more correct terminology for it. The exchanging of gifts and all these things. While they're traditions, they do have some kind of a basis within the biblical text, and so you see that there is a connection there. Excuse me. But let's kind of like examine a little bit more. And so this opens up the question of when was Yeshua or Jesus born? And the correct answer is that we don't know. we actually don't know when he was born. We don't have an actual date stamp. We don't have his birth certificate or anything like that. So it's definitely a question that's up in the air. And would this make a difference as far as what you believe, or it shouldn't? It really shouldn't. But there is 3 prevalent theories out there, and the basis for them is Leviticus 23. Leviticus 23, if you're not familiar with it, is the list of the Moedim, or the biblical feasts. These are God's feasts. They're not Israel's feast. They're not the Jewish people's feast. They're not exempt to Christians. These are God's feast for his followers. So if you incorporate yourself to the family of believers, there is a responsibility to observe these feasts. I don't want to get into the whole political or technicalities and theologies that came up after the fact, but realistically speaking, Jews and Christians should acknowledge these feasts, because they belong to God, not to the people. And so the basis, like I said, is that, but examining the patterns of the feast with the life of Jesus, basically. And so the first of the feast that people speculate Jesus or having to do with the birth or the time span of when Jesus was born is of course Pesach, or also known as Passover. The Greek is Pascha, and Pasqua in the Latin. And nowadays, in modern times, there's actually 3 feasts that are lumped up into what is known as the festival of Passover, which includes unleavened bread and bikurim, or first fruits. And so this is one of the speculations that they say, Jesus would have been born around this time, springtime. They throw in the whole thing about the shepherds being outside and tending their herd while they get the announcement from the angels. I disagree with that, for the simple reason that this gets fulfilled at the end of Jesus' life, during his final days in ministry, and so here on earth. And so basically that takes away the whole credibility of that, and just the basis of shepherds being outside or inside at the time. I mean, let's examine the climate. We have to factor in a bunch of things. But the pattern tends to fit that it's fulfilled at the end of Jesus's earthly life here and ministry, and so it actually Pesach is correspondent to what traditionally we celebrate or acknowledge, observe on what is known as Good Friday, which is the day of the death, triumph, and crucifixion. Unleavened bread would be the Sabbath day, where he is technically resting, and in the tomb. But it's also believed that this is the period where his soul went down to Sheol, or Hades, or hell, and basically preached to the inhabitants about their destiny, and so that's where that gets reconciled or felt. And then there's Bikurim, or first fruits, which is the final day, and this would correspond with Resurrection Sunday. Then we have the second most popular option or choice for some of the theologians and scholars out there, that throw out the Feast of Tabernacles, or Booths, Sukkot, and this happens in the early fall period, normally around September, October period, corresponding with the month of Tishrei. And so there's a sequence of the fall feast, all fall pretty much in sequence. So you have Yom Teruah, which is called the Feast of Trumpets, amongst other names, and then which is on the first of the month, and then you count 10 days, and you have Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, and then there's a 5-day period, and then on the 15th day you have the beginning of Sukkot, or Tabernacles, and it's an 8-day feast celebration. And some people say that this is closer to the time that Jesus would have been born. The primary reference for that is John 1:14, because it says that the Word became flesh and He tabernacled among us. Once again, I disagree with this one, because if we actually study another one of John's writings, and then also a lot of the messianic prophecies believe in, with like Ezekiel and Zechariah, I believe is the other one, where it gives you the idea that this actually is at the millennial kingdom, what we would refer to as the millennial reign, or the millennial kingdom, going into eternity, or the concept of Olam Rabbah, which is the kingdom to come. In Jewish, it's the basically the same concept, and so and the reason for that is that the book of Revelation seems to point at this happening at the end period. So that's really the reason why I don't necessarily agree. I mean, if it happens, it happens. If that's what his birth was, like I said, the correct answer is we don't know. So it could be any day. But really, I lean more towards the third option, which is the late fall, early winter, which falls in line with Hanukkah. Part of the reason for that is that when you study all these things out, and you study church history, Jewish history, and kind of consolidate the Bible to these periods and everything that's going on, you see that the so-called church fathers, starting with in the 2nd century and going up into the third, right before the official split between Judaism and what would become Christianity. There's this growth of the Gentile church, and so the Gentile church at some point felt that they had to make a break away from from the roots of everything. And so, I mean, just going into history and seeing that history tends to have repeat itself, we see that we're not as clever as we think. And so what really probably happened is that all they did, similar to what happened with Passover and Easter, they just tweaked the days by a few days, but you still have to consolidate, Passover with the Passion Week in order to make it somewhat accurate as to when Resurrection Sunday falls. If you haven't heard my teaching on this, you can go into the teaching on Lent, which kind of leads into gives you some of the summary of details as to the calculations. I don't want to get too caught up with this, but like I said, here's the first clue that the Feast of Hanukkah actually starts on the month of Kislev on the 25th day. And it's a 8-day feast going all the way to the 2nd or 3rd. There's a carryover. Like I said, it gets too complicated, but it's the only feast that actually goes into another month. If you notice, like I said, Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits are within the same week. Then you go into Pentecost. Pentecost is, on the same date. And then you have the fall feast, which fall in the month of Tishrei. And Purim as the other one, which falls in the month of Adar, or Adar 2 on leap years. And so, thinking back and kind of aligning this to the Julian or Caesarean calendar, and then eventually to the Gregorian calendar, you'll see that it kind of makes sense that all they did was basically change it by a couple of days, and Hanukkah typically falls somewhere in between mid to late November, early late December, depending on the year, and if leap years kind of make the adjustment. So every so often you'll find that December 25th and Kislev 25th kind of coincide with each other. I think this happened a couple years ago. And so what if that year, some 2020 or so years ago, this particular person, Jesus, was born on that date. It makes sense to some of the teachings that he later does, especially when you look at that John chapter 10. It's very interesting, the different connections that you have. But basically, those are the three main theories as far as to giving a date stamp to the birth of Yeshua or Jesus. And aside from that, like I said, the correct answer is, from a biblical standpoint, from a historical standpoint, from a scholarly or academic standpoint, is we just don't know. So if anybody comes and tells you, I have the specific date of when and Jesus, I found his birth certificate or whatever, you should kind of not only question that, but run away from that. It's like, we don't know. That's the right answer. And we can speculate everything else. And, there's traditions tied into the whole birth of Jesus. And we know for a fact that the reason that the church picked December 25th is a tradition, first of all, and it's has to do with the winter solstice. So, and the winter solstice being approximately within the 20 and 25th period. Nowadays is approximately the 21st or 22nd of December when it usually typically starts. So that's the beginning of winter, and then it also ties into some pagan beliefs, but that's besides the point. And so this gives you an idea, because if you've heard that song, the 12 Days of Christmas, the 12 Days of Christmas is actually a thing. We don't really see the whole celebration that goes with it much in modern times, but 12 Days of Christmas actually starts in December 25th, and it goes all the way to January 5th. And so this coincides with the calculations of the Orthodox Church using primarily the Julian or Caesarean calendar versus the Western Church, or the Roman Catholic, Protestant, Anglican churches that use the Gregorian calendar to do their calculations. And so, for example, the Orthodox Christmas falls on the Gregorian date of January 7th, which is almost 2 weeks out from our traditional celebration on December 25th Gregorian. December 25th Gregorian coincides with December 12th on the Julian calendar. And so you have all these little fluctuations, but there's a couple of things that would have happened during those periods. Like I said, if he was born December 25th, coinciding with Hanukkah, Kislev 25th, and then there's a tradition of primarily in the English world with the Commonwealth of celebrating what is known as Boxing Day. Boxing Day is basically the poor man's Christmas. So everybody who had to work on Christmas to serve the master then basically got the following day, which is December 26th. And now if you're a sports fanatic and you watch the English Premier League, you can catch a little football action going on there, soccer. Then December 27th through the 31st, nothing really much goes on there. But then you have January 1st. This would coincide with the ritual of Brit Milah, or the circumcision. And so this is when Jesus would have been taken to be circumcised and presented at the temple. And in the Gospel of Luke, there's a reference to that taking place. So, excuse me. Then you have January 2nd through the 5th. In most Western practices, you will see that January 6th is the called the Epiphany, or the celebration of the Magi, or the three wise men. Once again, the three wise men is erroneous teaching, because if you read the actual scriptures, it actually says that there was three gifts. It doesn't specify how many actual Magi showed up, and it most likely would have been a confederation of these people that came from the east. Most scholars nowadays would agree that they probably came from the Babylonian side, modern day Persia. That so from coming from that area, and I mean, some people believe that these were the people that Daniel, the prophet, trained after. He was able to interpret the dreams, and then so that's why they had a knowledge, and they were looking for the signs. And then, like I said, on January 7th is the Orthodox Christmas celebration. So, these are just little interesting facts. Some of these, like I said, we can't become dogmatic on them. We can't build a whole doctrine based on these things because we don't have the actual evidence to back it up. These are pure speculation. Like I said, I gave you my refutals or support of why I lean towards those ideas, but at the end of the day, I could be wrong, and the primary thing that we should all get out of this is that as followers of Jesus, we follow him and his teachings. We don't follow doctrines made up by man that while I'm not completely against, the problem is that these a lot of the times make up put limitations on certain things and make up erroneous teachings that go along with it. And so that's why we have all the different denominations and splits that eventually really the only one that can reconcile this is the Messiah. And so I believe that Jesus is going to fix all this when he comes back, because I believe he's coming back. And according to messianic prophecies, he's going to reconcile, and he's going to be the one to fix all the wrong that we've done during his rule here. So, just a little bit of a interesting holiday feel to it. Let's not put too much emphasis or importance on being specific or selective about what we celebrate, what we don't celebrate, why we celebrate. Is the whole thing is to be able to have a relationship with God, and I mean, these are outlets. These are ways that we can actually do that. He's allowed for these things to happen and to kind of become somewhat of a institution, you could say, to allow the people to express their not only the cultural aspect, but their religious beliefs. And so, at the end of the day, we have Hanukkah, or we have Christmas, or we have both. But let's be a little bit more knowledgeable and respectful of each other. And with that being said, I think I covered all that I wanted to cover on this topic for now. I'm sure I'll find something interesting and I'll add to the story, but for now, Psalm 122 verse 6 says, Shalom, Shalom, Yerushalayim. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I'm out. Until next time, Shalom and Ahava.